February the 16th, it will be Pancake Day. And then the next day, which is called Ash Wednesday, will be the beginning of Lent. Let's find out what Lent is all about.
Why is it that once a year we eat pancakes? Why is Pancake Day sometimes called Shrove Tuesday? What is a shrove, and what is Ash Wednesday all about? Why do they happen on different dates each year? And what's the connection with Lent, Easter and full moons? Well, it's all down to Jesus. Christians believe that Jesus is God's Son, and he was killed on a cross on Good Friday to take the punishment for the things we've said, done or thought that hurt God, what the Bible calls sin. So when God raised him back to life on Easter Sunday, meaning that death had been overcome, sins could be forgiven, and new life was open to all, that was an event really worth celebrating. In 325 AD, there was a gathering of Christian bishops at the Council of Nicaea. Calendars were a bit more random in those days, but they decided that Easter Sunday would always be on the first Sunday after the full moon that fell on or after the 21st of March, the day when days and nights are of equal length. So, if you love dates, you'll be thrilled to know that Easter Sunday can fall on one of any 35 different dates, ranging from the 22nd of March, which it will be next in 2285, so don't hold your breath, and the 25th of April, which it will be next in 2038. So that's why the date of Easter moves about, but how does that affect Pancake Day? Let's go back to Jesus. At the beginning of his ministry, the Bible tells us that Jesus went off into the wilderness by himself for 40 days to fast, that's to go without food, and spend time alone with God. Christians aim to live as Jesus lived, so the same bishops who decided when Easter Sunday should be celebrated also proposed a 40-day period when Christians should focus on living more simply and seeking God. This period became known as Lent, from the Old English word Lengton, meaning springtime. They decided to slot these 40 days in before Easter, starting with what we now call Ash Wednesday, the day after Shrove Tuesday. So because the date of Easter changes each year, so does the date of Shrove Tuesday. Now those of you who are hot on calendars will spot that the gap between Ash Wednesday and Easter Sunday is not 40 days, but 47. This is because Christians don't fast on any Sunday, as this is the day they believe Jesus came back to life. This is good news for everyone, as it means that if you do give something up for Lent, Sundays don't count. So how do Shrove Tuesday and Ash Wednesday get their names? Ash Wednesday is so called because on that day there is a tradition of palm branches being burnt, and their ashes then being used to mark a cross on the foreheads of believers as a sign of repentance, saying sorry to God for sins committed and wanting to live simply to please him. And because Christians would be fasting throughout Lent, they wanted to make sure their homes weren't full of fatty food to tempt them, like pancakes, so they would eat them all up on the day before. And on this Tuesday, churches held a special service called a shriving service. Shriving means people say sorry and are forgiven for their sins, and so are spiritually clean ahead of the 40 days of Lent. So this is called Shrove Tuesday. Everyone went to church to be shriven. So pancakes, shroves and ashes, there you have it. Pancakes on Shrove Tuesday, ashes on Ash Wednesday, and all of it because of Jesus.
Lent for Christians is a time to concentrate on God, to pray, perhaps to give something up, and to think more about other people. What is Lent? Lent is the period leading up to Easter. It begins on Ash Wednesday and finishes on the day before Easter Sunday. Lent lasts for 40 days. Sundays don't count in this total. Some Christians observe the period of Lent and some don't, but it's really a time of preparation or getting ready for the celebration of Easter. Here's a Lent calendar for this year. You can see marked in yellow at the top is Shrove Tuesday, the day we call Pancake Day. We'll think about that in a minute. And then in purple, Ash Wednesday, the day that Lent begins. And then all the light coloured bluey purples are all part of the period of Lent. You notice that the Sundays are different because Sundays are always a day of celebration. And then towards the end we have 3 more purple days: Maundy Thursday, Good Friday and Easter Eve. And they are part of Easter weekend, but they're still in Lent. And then we get the celebrations of Easter. You notice a couple of other different days. On March the 14th in green we have Mothering Sunday, or often we call it Mother's Day, which is always a special day about halfway through Lent. Then we have Palm Sunday in yellow, which is the week before Easter, and then Easter Sunday. And then in our country anyway, we also have a holiday on the Monday, which we call Easter Monday. So this is the calendar for this year. So what's the story of Lent? Lent lasts for 40 days to remind Christians of the time when Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. Here's the story from the Bible. At the beginning of Jesus' ministry for God, he was baptized, and after that he was led out into the desert area. And while he was there, he spent time praying and worshipping God. He would be there for 40 days and nights, with no food or drink. While he was in the desert, God's enemy, Satan, came to test Jesus and tempt him to do wrong things. Satan first tempted Jesus by trying to get him to change stones into loaves of bread because he would be hungry. But Jesus refused and said, "No, God says that we don't live on bread alone, but also on all of God's words." Next, God's enemy took Jesus to the top of the temple and told him to throw himself off because angels would protect him. But Jesus refused and said, "No, you should not be testing God." Lastly, Satan took Jesus up a high mountain and said, "Look, all of the world can be yours if only you will bow down and worship me." Again, Jesus refused and said, "No, we should worship only the Lord our God." And Satan left Jesus. God sent angels to care for Jesus, and at the end of the 40 days, he left the desert and began his special work for God. Pancake Day, or Shrove Tuesday, is the day before Lent begins. But what's it about? Well, the word shrove comes from an old word, shrive, and that means to confess and be forgiven. In other words, to say sorry for things that we do wrong and ask people to forgive us. On Shrove Tuesday, pancakes are eaten as a way of saying that we want to use up all the rich, fatty food in the house before a time of Lent, when usually plain foods were eaten in the past. So pancakes, which are made from eggs and flour and milk and sugar and other delicious toppings,
were a way of using up all those tasty ingredients. Sometimes people have pancake races for charity. It's good to have a go at tossing a pancake, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I'm not very good at it. What kind of topping do you like on your pancake? Maybe syrup, or lemon and sugar? Maybe jam, chocolate spread? Have a think what would be your favourite.
The first day of Lent is called Ash Wednesday. On this day, some Christians hold a special service in church, where they have a cross made out of ash marked onto their forehead. The ash is made by burning palm crosses, and these are left over from the previous year's Easter. And the priest makes a mark with the ash onto people's foreheads. Here is one of those palm crosses.
This picture, you can see some palm crosses and then somebody holding one very carefully and burning it, and then that will turn into ash, and the ash is made into a powder. You can see a little bowl called a pestle and mortar, and the ash then is made into a powder that is put onto people's foreheads. Here's the priest making an ash cross on somebody's forehead in church.
Lent is the season of the Christian year that begins on Ash Wednesday. It lasts for 40 days and leads up to the joyful celebration of Easter. It is for Christians a time of fasting, prayer, penance and charity. On Ash Wednesday, Christians gather to celebrate the Eucharist and to have a cross of ash traced on their foreheads. This powerful symbol reminds us that we don't live forever and that we need to put right the things in our lives that separate us from one another and from God. As the priest traces the cross, the words, "Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return," are said. By receiving the cross of ash, we acknowledge our human frailty and our dependence upon God's healing grace. The 40 days of Lent are a time for growth and for drawing closer to Jesus on our Christian pilgrimage, for reflecting on what really matters in our lives, and for turning back to God in repentance. This prayerful time of fasting and repentance enables us to grow more fully into the people God made and calls us to be, transforming us into the likeness of Jesus Christ, whose death and resurrection we will celebrate in Holy Week and at Easter.
What else happens in Lent today? We often hear about people giving things up for Lent, but it isn't just about that. It's also about doing things as well. Often, Christians choose to give something up during Lent, perhaps sweets or chocolate, junk food. Adults maybe choose Lent as a time to stop smoking, or perhaps it's a good time to spend less time on electronics. But it isn't just about giving things up. For Christians, Lent is also a time to do things, to read the Bible and to pray more, perhaps to give to charity, to help others, some good deeds. It's not all about giving things up. At the end of Lent comes Easter, the most exciting celebration of all for Christians, and we'll think about that another time.
Here are 2 activities that you might like to try. Firstly, a good deeds diary. I've put a link to this at the bottom of the video. And each week during Lent, we focus on a different activity and think of something that you could do that would be helpful in each section. So the food one, what could you do? Perhaps not waste food, or perhaps share food with somebody. Charity. Perhaps you could save a bit of money and give it to a charity that you know. Environment. Maybe a bit of litter picking just around the area where you live. Friends. You might not see all of your friends at the moment. Perhaps you could send them a message, call them, make them a card, do something that reminds them that you're thinking about them. Home. What can you do around your house that would be helpful? And family. Think of somebody in your family that you aren't able to see at the moment. Maybe give them a call. Perhaps you could send them a message or a letter. See what you can do during Lent. And then the other activity involves making a kind of an egg shape. And I've divided my egg into 4. And I'll put a link at the bottom for this too. But you can just draw your own. And the 4 sections on the egg say thinking, praying, reading and helping. All things that Christians like to do during Lent. Then in the middle, we're going to make, mine's fallen off, a pretzel shape. You see my pretzel there. And I've made the pretzel out of a pipe cleaner. You could just draw one if you don't have any pipe cleaners. So here's my pipe cleaner and you just curl it round until you make your pretzel and twist the pipe cleaners round. There's my pretzel and that would be stuck with a piece of sellotape in the middle. But why pretzels? Well, pretzels used to be a kind of a Lent food. We've already thought, haven't we, about Pancake Day and how we use up all the good things like the sugar and the butter and the eggs for making our pancakes. Well, a long time ago, monks who lived in monasteries, they invented pretzels, if you like. They first made them as a Lent food because they're just basically made of flour and water. And so they became something that was eaten during Lent. And I think the other reason for using pretzels is because they remind us of arms that are crossed over. If you do this with your arms, you make a kind of a pretzel shape with your body. And sometimes people have used that as a symbol of praying and thinking during Lent. So you could have a go at making a pretzel shape in an egg and think of things that you could do.